The concert videos that you're watching right now are called raw clips in the music industry, or at least the EDM industry. A raw clip is the footage that you capture of an artist during one of their songs and/or a big moment that's taking place during their set. Usually you'll film the buildup of the track and maybe 10 to 25 seconds after the beat drops as well, depending on the song. When you're offering your photo and video services to a client, sometimes they will only request raw clips, since that's what performs better on socials, especially when they're converted to vertical. Also, raw clips are not to be mistaken for the footage that you capture for the purpose of recaps or after movies. That footage is a bit different, as usually you'll focus more on the guest experience, you'll most likely gather a bunch of establishing shots, and you'll shoot in a higher frame rate for slow motion purposes. That type of footage is a lot more intentional, to the point where you'll find yourself staging shots in order to get specific moments on camera to propel the story forward. I discussed this style of concert footage in depth in my Aftermovie videography video, a personal favorite of mine. I'll link it in the description below so you can give it a watch after this video. That said, raw clips on the other hand are completely unscripted, candid moments that most of the time happen unexpectedly. What I mean by this is that in most cases, you usually won't know when a certain song is going to play, unless they tell you beforehand. But artists will usually say something like, "Oh, I'll drop my new single in the second half of my set," which I mean is helpful, but when you're juggling between shooting photo and video, on stage and off, you really gotta be hyper vigilant to the music the artist is playing. That's why researching your client's music beforehand is also extremely important. Additionally, on the unscripted, candid side of things, you really are at the mercy of the artist when you're capturing these raw clips, or you need to dance around other videographers that are on stage. It's quite the balancing act, but the good news is that with most music, especially EDM, there's a good chance you'll know when the beat drop is coming. So capture as many of those sub 60-second raw clips as you can and shoot your photos in between. But also shoot photos during some beat drops too. Just make sure it's during a song that either the artist isn't trying to promote or it's a song that nobody cares about. If you're unsure, use your best judgment. But in most cases when you're unsure, I'd say film the raw clip just in case. I'll always film my raw clips at the widest focal length possible with the lens that I'm shooting with, which is usually a 16 to 35 G Master lens for Sony or a fisheye lens alternative to truly capture as much of the energy as possible, since sometimes even 16mm still isn't wide enough. Feel free to experiment though, like this clip of 7 lines that I captured at EDC at 70mm. Now I'm not gonna wrap up this video without letting you know the best camera settings to capture these raw clips. First and foremost, like I mentioned earlier, unless you're capturing footage for slow motion purposes, your raw clips will be shot in 24 frames per second, just like the one you're watching right now. Next is shutter speed, which will be 1/50th of a second due to the 180-degree shutter rule. The 180-degree shutter rule is a standard in videography as it explains the relationship between shutter speed and frame rate when mimicking motion the same way the human eye experiences it in real life. And in order to do this, your shutter speed should be as close to double as you can get to your frame rate. For aperture and ISO, adjust accordingly depending on the shooting variables you are working with, because nobody wants overexposed footage. But if you know there will be pyro or fireworks or anything like that, drop your ISO as low as you can. Lastly, I don't shoot my raw clips in any specific color profile, but if you're watching this and you're just getting started in the industry, I would suggest shooting in a color profile like S-Log so that you have more control over the colors in your footage when you're editing. This way you can create a unique look that artists will want for themselves, and there's a higher chance you'll end up getting booked a lot more. Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing, guys. Filming raw clips is such a nuanced topic, and this video could easily be 2 or 3 times as long. So if you have any lingering questions, drop them down in the comments. That said, from here, feel free to check out the video on the screen now to learn about my 6-step process on how I edit my raw clips for my clients in Premiere Pro. I'll see you there.